What secret did you learn about someone after many years of friendship? Story 1. I was on a team in high school for 4 years, got pretty close with the other girls on the team, and we all hung out all of the time. We decided to go bowling together, and one of these girls, who we had spent hours a week with for years and talked about everything under the sun with, showed up with her own shoes, gloves, bag, and bowling ball, and crushed us all with a near-professional score. She had never mentioned bowling to any of us, even once, even when we were making plans to go bowling. Story 2. Found out that a longtime golf buddy of mine was a professional ballroom dance teacher in his previous years. Guy is 300 plus pounds and just didn't give off ballroom dancer vibes. My wife of 10 years used to work for Arthur Murray dance schools and didn't believe he knew how to dance, so she invited him and his wife over for dinner. Boy, was she wrong. Golf buddy twirled her, dipped her, the whole 9 yards, as both myself and his wife stood there with our jaws on the floor. After going through 7 different dances with my wife, he twirled her one last time towards me and said, "Told you so." We had a great dinner, and I learned something new about the 300-pound Samoan that I golf with every weekend. Story 3. My grandfather was always jumpy around thunderstorms. We assumed it was because he was shot down during the war and it sounded like anti-aircraft fire. Nope. Turns out when he was a teenager, he got struck by lightning. The craziest part was, this happened the day before he started dating my grandmother, and she'd never heard that story. Story 4. I worked summers as a ticket booth operator at a minor league baseball stadium for around 3 years. The owner was this really nice old guy, mid to late 80s, who always showed up in a wheelchair being walked by his daughter. He always rewarded his employees with bonuses for good work. He even gave me $300 once for helping cash out one of his close childhood friends. One of the final games I worked there, he called me into his owner's box and gave me beer and free food, as well as $1,500. Just to thank me for all the hard work I did for him over the years. He told me the reason he liked me so much was because I didn't pretend to like him because of who he was. Confused, I asked him to clarify, and he asked me if I seriously didn't know. I was still confused, and then he told me the truth. He was actually a Hall of Fame pitcher who played with the Cleveland Indians and Philadelphia A's from the 1940s early 1960s, and even served in WW2, and showed me a replica of his Hall of Fame plaque. We laughed about it, and he further insinuated why he liked me so much. He passed away around a year after this, and I attended his funeral. All around an amazing dude, and I feel like such an idiot for not knowing who he was. Story 5. I learned my husband was attracted to children after knowing him 8 years, shortly after our 6th wedding anniversary. I found a video one day, and our marriage dissolved in an instant. I contacted police and cooperated fully with the police. He's in prison now. Story 6. I found out that one of my best friends used to be a competitive figure skater. We'd been friends for years, and she never mentioned it. One day we were talking about childhood hobbies, and she casually mentioned she used to compete at a national level. I was shocked. She even showed me some old photos and videos. It was so cool to see a completely different side of her. Story 7. Not so much a secret, but news to me. My roommate and I were in the USMC together, and if you aren't married, then you must maintain a barracks room. Most people take that as meaning you have to live in the barracks, but if you show up to field day and keep your room clean, you can't technically get in trouble if you decide you don't want to stay there all the time. My buddy was married at the time, so he had his own house off base. And after getting tired of the barracks life, I started staying at his house more and more, helping out and whatnot. We were definitely friends, always had each other's backs, and had similar humor, really growing close, getting into each other's hobbies. Well, one day, almost out of the blue, his wife leaves him to find herself, which is pretty fucked as they had a child together. So, Buddy is now single and back in the barracks, almost ready to EAS, basically get out of the USMC, so he lets his now ex-wife have custody for a few months back in their home state so he can get his shit together to presumably work out a custody deal. Nothing too notable happens. We have a sending-off party for him, and he heads back home. I spend another 6 months to maybe a year still in. I'm pretty shitty when it comes to keeping in touch with people, so I figure he probably feels a little betrayed. I didn't reach out a whole lot during that time. I get out and move in with my parents. I saved quite a bit of money not having a car, mostly living in the barracks and eating at the chow hall, so I take a year off. Spent time with my family, didn't have any friends really, when my buddy starts reaching out. Every few months or so, he'd say stuff like, "There's a really good job here. You wouldn't have to rent a place, you could stay with me. I could stay there rent-free if I looked after his kid." At this point, he had him every other week, another job opportunity. "You should just visit so we can hang out or whatever." I finally think to myself, why not? It seems to me he's either lonely or trying to look out for me. So fly out, see his house, and boom, pandemic shuts down airports and shit, and I don't have a car. So basically become a live-in nanny, but it's not so bad we're having fun and have each other's backs again. One day we get completely shit-wrecked drunk. Happens sometimes, but he tells me something that just shocked me. I am the main benefactor of his will. Here I am thinking we're just good friends, and dude's like, no, you have the responsibility of making sure that whatever I have is used to help my son live a good life. Damn, that hit me right in the feels. Askreddit. I had been the beneficiary of his will for a few years by the time he told me. Story 8. It wasn't really a secret, so I don't know if it qualifies. But I have a work friend we've known each other for years. Grab beers together, hang outside of work from time to time. Turns out we've been in each other's orbit since birth. He mentioned his mom knowing someone I knew via my mom. We started going through contacts. We'd attended the same schools, just different classes that never blended. His brother dated my cousin's best friend. We'd worked for the same companies, just a mix of one of coming in as the other was leaving, or the company was big enough for paths to never cross. We'd lived in the same neighborhoods multiple times. We had the same favorite restaurant in one place, we just had different regular days to go. Story 9. I started therapy a while ago and confided in a friend about my CSA. She confided she has also been SA'd, and it was her by her brother. Plus, he had been living in a house owned by their mom, refusing to pay rent or let her inside, and they had been dealing with legal issues around it for years. They had just gotten him out of the house and out of their lives. I was floored. I had no idea she had been going through any of this. The things people struggle through, and you would never know, because there is so much silence and shame around it. This is someone I'm close to. I respect her strength even more now. Story 10. Close friend had her marriage end when she was caught having an online affair. I was supportive without being judgmental. I don't know the full picture, and both parties have a lot going on and are a handful. I very recently found out that the person she had an affair with was almost certainly, though not 100% sure, a minor at the time. It was online, so whether or not she knew is up for debate, but the more I think about it, the more I doubt every single thing she says now. Story 11. One of my best friends faked an olive allergy for about 15 years. Someone exposed him at his B-day, and he started panicking and yelling about blowing his cover of just not liking them olives. We all just laughed at him, and I was going to use that against him as long as I could. That was end of May. He passed away suddenly 2 weeks ago, so didn't get to use against him much. Story 12. I recently found out that one of my good friends is really rich, like comes from old money rich. She has the biggest heart and is incredibly sweet and down to earth, so I would have never known. It wasn't until she got married that I started to piece it together. Where are you having your bachelorette party? Oh, my family has a condo in Florida that we've had since before I was born. We're just going to chill there for a week. Where is the wedding? Oh, my dad is part of a club, so we're just going to have it there. Looks up the club and sees that there is a dress code just to walk into the freaking building, and it costs a couple $100s a month to be a part of it. At the cocktail hour, there was a vase in glass that had pretty birds on it, so I took a look. There was a plaque inside that said it was donated to the club and was made in like the 1700s. Priceless art that could be seen at the Met on display in this club as decoration. So, yeah, had no idea. In hindsight, when she got her master's in education from an expensive university, I should have gotten the hint, LOL. But I mean it when I say she's a really phenomenal person. One of the biggest hearts you'll ever know. Just a gem of a human being. Story 13. I found out after years of being friends with Chris that he used to be married. We were just having a casual conversation over coffee when he mentioned something about his ex-wife. I was so shocked that I almost spilled my drink. I had no idea he had ever been married, let alone gone through a divorce. He told me that he got married young, and they ended up splitting amicably. But he never really talked about it because it wasn't a part of his life he felt defined him anymore. It was such a surprise because he's always been so private, and I realized there were whole parts of his life I didn't know about. Story 14. I had a friend who I had known quite closely for years. She had a plethora of ailments, everything from celiac disease to autism. I would also cater to her ailments, making sure there was no gluten, making sure to take her to places where she wouldn't get sensory overload, not being offended if she wanted to go home early or be left alone, being a shoulder to cry on when she couldn't get pregnant because of her PCOS, she claimed this, being patient with her ADHD. Turns out she was faking it all. Till this day, I'm not sure why she would do this, but I think it was a form of attention-seeking and maybe narcissistic. Story 15, not quite the same, but it did make headlines recently. I was friends with this chick for a while. She always had the party spot and knew a lot of people. I went to a party once with my buddy and met this guy, John. They were all talking about how his girlfriend, a bigger part of the friend group, had been missing, assumed murdered, and the case hadn't been solved. My little sister got a job at a pizza place working with him around the same time. The chick I was friends with insisted up and down that there's no way the boyfriend, John, could have done it. One of many things I found disappointing enough about her to end the friendship. For years, she partied with her friend Caitlin's killer and defended him. But when I told her my boyfriend was abusing me, and a year later he tried to kill me, she suddenly found the voice to call me an abuser since my boyfriend killed himself. Fucking coward. I've heard around town that she's sorry, but I've yet to hear it from the horse's ugly mouth. Story 16. Had a coworker that quickly became a friend. We all hung out as a group for years. Really fun, nice guy with a comedy podcast. A few years later, I found out he was on trial for molesting a young girl. He's in prison now. It's such a weird feeling. He had a good defense that the jealous husband was setting him up and blah blah. But regardless, they had enough evidence to can him. I still cannot believe it. But why would someone set someone up for that? Story 17. After years of on and off with my ex, it all finally exploded. I caught proof of her cheating, which also led to the nasty truth that multiple people within the friend group were aware of the cheating and never told me. Some went so far as to even help her facilitate her escapades at times. For example, we were at a house party, and out of nowhere, my ex starts getting an attitude with me over seemingly nothing. One of the other girls in the group backs her up real aggressively. Everybody is kind of confused. So those two end up leaving after my ex made some fucked up comment about my sister being a prostitute because she worked as a bartender at a strip club. We had all been drinking, so I just chalked it up to that since she was an angry drunk at times. Come to find out, they picked the fight out of nowhere so that they could both leave and go meet up with some dudes at a bar 45 minutes away. There were multiple instances of things like this having happened that I learned about after the fact. But the real kicker? When she was on vacation with the family for a family reunion, she cheated on me with her cousin. Story 18. After about 11 years of friendship, I learned that for 20 plus years her father, who was a preacher, had been M0 lesting underage boys and doing many other disgusting things. His wife knew the whole time and helped him cover it up, pay people off, etc. Then learned my ex-friend chose her disgusting father's side over anyone else once she found out what he had been doing, and she began to help try and cover it all up, deny it, etc. Grieving that friendship was hard, and probably always will be. Story 19. We recently learned that my grandmother gave up a baby for adoption in her early 20s before she met my grandpa. She passed away a few years ago, but we've since found him and are all getting to know each other. Pretty cool, but I feel so bad for what my grandmother went through. When she found out she was pregnant, her boyfriend dumped her, and her parents kicked her out of the house. Story 20. It happened a couple of weeks ago, but I learned from my wife, also my best friend, that she hated my marriage proposal. The only good thing she had to say about it was that at least I didn't embarrass her publicly by doing it at a restaurant. She also felt like my real marriage proposal was the moment I suggested we go ring shopping after she was mad at me. I had no recollection of that particular moment. I felt a lot like Ralph Wiggum in that moment when Lisa Simpson rejects him and you can see the split instant where his heart breaks. God, it was a brutal truth. Story 21. My friend was a catfish. This was back in the early days of the internet. Bonded with someone on LiveJournal and introduced her to a few of my real-life friends. We had a very tight-knit group of folks. We sent presents in the mail, talked on the phone, etc. for a few years. One day, one of these very close friends just deleted everything. We were really worried and kept calling on the phone. Eventually, it came out that the person we'd come to call a friend wasn't quite real. The person was real enough, but was a very casual internet user. Her roomie decided to take over and role-play her life online because Rumi's life was boring. Rumi had issues. Who knows? Rumi had made friends with all of us, but eventually felt some guilt over it. Coincidentally, this was also the time when Rumi was busted for stealing the friend's credit cards. This was maybe 15 years ago. I've gotten to know Friend for real, and she is a cool person. To this day, I'm not sure what parts of what I know are real and what were made up. I also don't know what happened to Rumi. Even though she was a serial liar, I thought she was a friend for a long time. I hope Rumi has gotten the help she desperately needed. It absolutely fucked with my ability to trust people, and I'm still working on that. Story 22. I was very close friends with this person from my college who I eventually found out came from an old money billionaire family. I had no clue until I went to her house, and she slowly revealed some details over time. She was extremely down to earth and humble and a very kind person. She wasn't very lavish in how she dressed or presented herself either, so I guess it was not very obvious. Story 23. Pretty tame one. I used to be a magician. At the same time I was performing, I had a friend that I would often hang out with to play guitar. He knew I was a magician and even helped me work out logistics for some stage tricks. After 5 years of friendship, one day I opened the closet in his room and it's completely full of juggling gear. Torches, axes, bowling pins, knives, etc. I had zero clue he could juggle. How could you be friends with a magician and never mention you're into juggling? Still baffles me every time I remember. Story 24. When I was a kid in the 90s, a neighbor 2 doors down was always being overly dramatic and asking us kids to slow down on our mopeds, go-karts, dirt bikes, etc. In a way, that was hilarious. It wasn't until years later that I found out she was a popular comedian, author, and actor. She wrote one of my favorite books, Fried Green Tomatoes, and on the other side of us, a few more doors down, lived another author of a famous book and movie. He was always at our house and left a book with a cover I thought was really funny. A year or two later, Tom Hanks played the lead and gave us some of the best quotes I still hear today.